Here is a mathematical question. What do you get if you add Persona 4 with Persona 3? Does it equal to Persona 7? My friends, that's completely incorrect, and the answer is you get a series known as Persona Q. How's it going, everyone? It is your boy, Frosty R&B, the Frostman himself. In today's video, we're going to be going over the Persona Q manga series. If you just want to see what the manga has to offer and how it differs from the game, go ahead and use the chapters tool down below. But if you're brand new to Persona Q and do not know what the heck it is, be sure to stick around because we're going to make a very quick run through of the origins of Persona Q. So with that being said, let's get started. Persona Q, originally released for the Nintendo 3DS, which was Persona's very first game on the Nintendo hardware. Hard to believe, right? However, don't get too excited because unlike the mainline games, Persona Q actually uses a different gameplay borrowed from a different series from Atlus. Atlus has another flagship title known as Etrian Odyssey, aka Sekkaiju no Meikyu, which was originally released for the Nintendo DS. In Etrian Odyssey, the gameplay is mostly first-person dungeon crawler with lots of difficult critical thinking puzzles. And of course, if you were like me that thought Q stood for QT or Chibi because of the artwork, we were dead wrong. The Q is actually a reference to Etrian Odyssey, known as Meikyu. And of course, Q in Japanese, the spelling translated in romanization, KYU, actually means the number 9. How do these two connect? As for the P3 side, this takes place around the typhoon, which I believe happens in mid-September. And as for the P4 side, this occurs around the cultural festival around late October. Jumping into first impressions, we can already tell that they're going to be sticking with the chibi art style work from the Persona Q main game. You may have noticed there are 4 volumes for P4 side, but only 2. Why is that? Well, technically, you can start either P4 or P3 in the main game. The manga artists decided to go with P3 as a what-if scenario and P4 as the main scenario for the manga series, due to the fact that Persona 4 completely outsold Persona 3 in terms of sales when it first came out. Speaking of which, both of these Persona Q manga series are published by Kodansha Comics, but they have completely different writers and artists. The P4 side has Mizuno Moto, and the P3 side has Tobita. As usual, Atlus is aware of the manga series existing, so I can only cover the Persona 4 side Volume 1 and Persona 3 side Volume 1 as well. Looking at the Persona Q manga series, the covers are a glossy texture, while the majority of the book is going to be black and white, with the exception of Volume 1 for both P4 and P3 have a few full-fledged colored glossy pages, which this artwork looks amazing. And of course, to read a manga, you read from right to left, not left to right. But what's interesting about this manga series is that there is no instructions on how to read a manga, which will throw off some Teresas in the Amazon reviews. So no guys, this is not a reverse binding. Jumping into the Persona 4 Volume 1 side of the story, our story begins with Narukami dreaming about some kind of different dimension with this rift. He can summon, Izanagi, he gets into these shadows, and it is worth noting that sub-personas have no mention at all in this manga. And as for the P3 section, Makoto Yuki, for which his case in P4 side's story, he is known as Vice Leader. His only persona that he has in possession is Orpheus. But this was all a dream, or was it fate, sending out a message stating that these two will meet in a different dimension? I wonder. So Nanako wakes up Narukami from his dream, stating that he's going to be late for school. And it is worth noting that Kanji does pop up at the Dojima residence, just to hang out. They were supposed to go to school together. Nanako, being a sweet little child, saying that the burnt part is so bad for you for the breakfast part. Once this happens, we are going to be transitioning to Yasugami High, being introduced to the Persona 4 cast and A brief recap of what happened so far in P4, but it is worth noting that if you've never played Persona 4 before, you're going to miss some of these references. And after recapping with the P4 cast, they have noticed that there was some kind of bell ringing. Yukiko mentions that the bell ringing is some type of horror story known as the Seven Horrors of the School. This is somewhat true because Yasogami High, when they were in grade school, the P4 cast, there used to be a clock tower on Yasogami High campus. And somehow, the Seven Horrors story may be related to their situation, or so the P4 cast believes. Upon on discussion with some eavesdropping, we see Margaret, who summons our heroes to the Velvet Room. How she does this is she calls it the simplified Velvet Room door. So our heroes enter through the Velvet Room, but upon on arrival, this is not really the Velvet Room. As a matter of fact, this is more like a rift in space. After doing some fooling around, the Persona 4 cast stumble upon the attraction called Wonderland. Naoto is getting some detective suspicion and intuition, stating that this world may be very similar to the one in the TV. So upon entering the labyrinth, aka the dungeons for Persona Q, Naoto pursues Rise to summon her persona. In which case, despite being embarrassed, Rise actually summons her persona Himiko. She's able to detect shadows, and our heroes do fight the shadows within this dungeon. The way that the dungeons are handled, it's usually just some very basic exploration. They do throw in some fan service gags here and there. And of course, there are some puzzles, and we're going to be coming up to a very important component later in this video. But I definitely do want to state that how they do battles is they use the surrounding environment and use their persona elements to suit the environmental condition. So the Persona 4 cast have been split into two different groups. Group A decided to go further into the labyrinth to see if they find any more clues to this dimension, while Group B decides to go to the Culture Festival booths and or attractions to see if they can find any more lead-ups to what the heck is going on in this dimension. But upon with Group A's exploration, they stumble upon two characters known as Zen and Rei. With some misunderstanding going on, our heroes and Zen and Rei talk with each other to gather intel. Upon discussion, they both discovered that they have a common goal, and it's to get the heck out of this dimension. However, Zen and Rei have only really been in this labyrinth, so they believe that there's no exit in this labyrinth back to their own dimension. The P4 cast have taken both Zen and Rei back to the Yasogami High dimension they're stuck in. Searching throughout the campus, they found that there's no way outside of campus at all. There's no exits. Upon their search, a clock tower has suddenly appeared. What does this mean? How the heck did it get there? And of course, every single intermission, there is going to be like a persona bio of one of the main characters. And also, if you really want a recap of what happened last chapter, they reiterate this with some sock puppets, which I gotta say, this is some pretty damn good artwork. Upon confusion, the group decides to visit Margaret to see if she has any intel about the clock tower. Unfortunately, she has no intel about the clock tower. However, she states that the rift in this dimension is more of an interdimension between the P4 world and the P3's world. This is nothing more but a mere illusion of what's going on in Yasogami High. So technically, the students here, they're not real. They're just mere illusions. Zen and Rei become a bit scared about this, especially Rei, but she states that their memories have been taken, and the only way for them to retrieve their memories is to go into each of the 4 labyrinths and retrieve the treasures to help them recover some memory. So our group has returned back to the Wonderland Labyrinth. They talk about the history and origins about Alice in the Wonderland, because technically this is based off of the theme of Alice in the Wonderland. And they continue to explore, and upon further exploration, they find an FOE, aka Physis Okane Eidolon, which is Greek for something. I just don't know what it is. But if you want to be funny like myself, FOE stands for effing overpowered enemy. and you just got to get the heck out of there, because think of these guys as really overpowered mini bosses. It is possible to fight them and defeat them, but you got to really strategize and be very precise with your planning. This is a demonstration of how they use the personas with the environment conditions to get the F out of there. The P4 cast has finally arrived at the depths of the labyrinth, and upon entering through the boss door, they meet with the Queen of Hearts of this dungeon. The main reason why I'm stating this fact is because she's a pretty tough boss if you don't know what you're doing. The reason why is that because her cards that are based off the soldiers, they just keep coming and coming. And as our Persona 4 cast is continuing fighting with the Queen of Hearts and her minions, all worn out, is all hope lost? Nah, not really. The P3 cast decides to join in the fight against the Royal Flush and of course the Queen of Hearts. They'll take it from here on out, and pretty much Volume 1 ends at this cliffhanger. But I want to definitely add some notes here, because what if Teddy got a Invoker to summon his persona? These are just more like what if gags and some pretty cool bonus illustrations. The one part I definitely want to bring up though is they give you a Persona 3 side of the story if P4 was in this role assisting rather than P3, where they're very exhausted. They give you a lot of illustration preview from this section, which I find this pretty cool. Upon finding the treasures, which you don't see this in Persona 4 side of the story until Volume 2, Rei and Zen recover some memory of their past. And with that being said, the group returns, and that's how Volume 1 officially ends. As for the P3 side, it actually begins with Elizabeth greeting us from the Velvet Room. Then it quickly transitions to the P3 cast doing their, nightly grinding at Tartarus. Then they quickly transition to the Gekkoukan High, just hanging out, doing their daily life thing, introducing everyone and who's available during at that time for the cast. Then they go back to Tartarus, and this is how they enter to the different dimension of Yasogami High with the Culture Festival. It doesn't really change from there as much, but it does have a lot of P3 fan service. After doing some exploration and fooling around, the P3 cast stumbles upon the first dungeon of the game, but they are stopped by no other than Zen and Rei. Now, do take this as a cane of sugar, because I have not played through the 3 side of Persona Q, so I'm not sure if this is how they met, but the manga insists that they met at the Culture Festival, and saying that it's too dangerous to go in there. Then skipping all the way ahead, because they just really explored the dungeon with the P3's perspective, and there really isn't too much difference to cover other than you just prefer Persona 3 or Persona 4. That's really the main gist of it, but it's pretty much pretty identical to how they do their exploration progress. However, this is the part I want to get into where the P3 cast struggles against the Queen of Hearts from the first dungeon. On one hand, it's like you choose one decision. You're very curious to see how the other decision would impact if you did the what if scenario. But with that being said though, the P4 cast comes to save them. Queen of Hearts goes down and we get a gift, which is the bunny, which is very important later on in the story, which I'm not going to spoil. The main difference here is that they continue a little bit longer compared to the Persona 4 side of the story. They do give out notes and how they're doing with the manga series and what their thoughts are when it came to making this product. You have some funny gags going on, and I really like this because having a Persona character for the artist is actually pretty cool. And of course, you do get some of the beginnings of the Persona 4 side of story. In conclusion, the Persona Q manga series actually follows the main game's plotline pretty damn well. Although it does take away a lot of the fan servicey stuff from the games, I'm totally cool with that, because the game will always offer the most content among the 3 medias. So who is this manga series for? Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's really only for those who are Persona fans. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes today's review. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like and go nuts with the like button. Let me know in the comment section down below, what do you think of Persona Q? Positives, negatives, neutrals? Put it down in the comment section down below and let's have a debate on it. And of course, subscribe to the channel. with that being said, this has been your boy Frosty R&B. All I gotta say is stay chilly, keep gaming. I'll see y'all in the next one.